Hey, welcome to Unperturbed, the podcast where high-achieving Black women come to take off their strong Black woman cape. You know, the one that keeps them people-pleasing, overgiving, and putting themselves dead last. Yeah, we're not doing that anymore. On Unperturbed, we're empowering you to put you first, unapologetically and boldly, so you can show up for yourself the same way you've been showing up for everyone else. This is where empty vessels get refilled. So look, go ahead and like and subscribe to this channel, share it with your sister friends who are running around with empty cups too, and then come kick it with us inside The Haven, our private Facebook community where we go even deeper. Trust me, you need this space. Head on over to enterthehaven.net to join us. All right, it's time for the best part. Let's get into it. Hey, what's up? It's your girl, Dr. Rhonda. Back for another episode of Unperturbed, the podcast. Look, I don't take it for granted that you are spending some time with me, that you have logged into this podcast. It tells me that you are here because you are tired of doing the same old thing and trying to get new results, right? What we're doing now is new stuff so that we can get the new results. And today I'm going to be talking about boundaries and how boundaries are a love language to yourself, right? And to other people as well, but primarily for you. And the reason I wanted to talk about boundaries, and we'll probably have more conversations about boundaries, is because boundaries traditionally have been very difficult for me. Let's just be honest. Boundaries have been very difficult for me because I don't like worrying about whether or not someone is going to be upset with me because I've changed how I approach our relationship. As you well know, sometimes when you're dealing with people who are behaving in ways that are toxic to you, they can't always see, or they're not always in a position to admit that what they're doing to you is hurtful. And when you point it out, they're not always able to receive that information that you're telling them, hey, I don't like this. This doesn't sit well with me. It doesn't work well for me. And some things have got to change. And if you've been in relationships either with, people of all kinds of toxic natures, whatever they might be, they are myriad. But whatever they might be, you just don't want to deal with the drama of it, right? You don't want to deal with the fallout. You don't want to deal with, are you going to turn it back on me? Are you going to turn this into a fight? If I tell you how I feel, how do we end up fighting about how I feel? How does it work? So, a lot of times people pleasers, givers, those of us who have kind of been trained to think that way, conditioned to think that way, we tend to have a really difficult time setting boundaries. And in therapy, I was talking to my therapist and asking her, why is it so hard? And, to set and enforce boundaries, right? Because you can set them, but something happens when people bump up against that boundary. Like, that's a decision point. That's when it really matters. Do you really have the boundary, right? And I asked her, why is it so painful? Why is it so difficult for people like myself to draw a boundary and stick to the boundary? And she gave great insight. It's that something has to change, but you don't know how the person is going to react to you letting them know that something has to change. And so what we end up with is it's some internal turmoil, right? This internal feeling like, I know that this isn't healthy for me. I know I need to communicate it to this person, but what if, right? And that what if is so heavy. That what if is so heavy. That's the thing that, whether we realize it or not, that's what keeps us from enforcing the boundaries. Because a lot of times, truth be told, you're going to set forth the boundary. And you're like, I'm not going to allow people to do that to me ever again. Okay. And okay, so you set the boundary. And then you're like, They do it. And then you're like, now what do I do? Right? How am I going to enforce this boundary? Because enforcing this boundary might mean conflict, right? Here goes that big what if. What if I enforce this boundary and it means they never speak to me again? What if I enforce this boundary and we have an argument, or they attack me, right? Verbally. I may not be willing to argue with them, but now we're in this confrontational kind of space. A lot of us don't want to be in that space, right? So we avoid it. And a part of that avoiding means that we have flimsy or no boundaries at all. And I can tell you that from a place of expertise. I can tell you that from a place of been there, done that, right? But one of the things that I have been thinking about and considering and talking it over with, in therapy and with other women and in groups that I'm in, and we've been talking about boundaries over time. We've been saying, boundaries are not meant to push people away. It's really to give them the parameters by which you get to stay, right? It's telling them, I want you in my life. I just don't want the toxic crap in my life, right? And so you can come in, but leave your crap at the door, right? And so it narrows that entryway so that it only makes room for them and not for the crap that they often want to bring along with them, right? It's not meant, boundaries are not meant to scare people off. It's just the rules of the game, right? It's like when you go to a fine dining restaurant and they say, hey, we'd love to have you eat here, but you have to be wearing a dinner jacket. You have to be wearing a collared shirt. You may not have to have on a tie, but you have to have on a jacket and a collared shirt. And we're so serious about that when you get here and you don't have a jacket, we have one for you, because you're not going to come into our restaurant without a jacket. And when you say, but I want to eat, I understand. But the rules for entry are that you wear a jacket when you come inside. So there's rules of engagement. And it's not that I'm making you do anything. I'm not saying, go put on a jacket if you want to deal with me. I'm saying, I'll deal with you. I'd love to deal with you if you're wearing a jacket. If you choose not to wear a jacket, I respect your choice. But guess what you can't do? You can't eat here, right? So one of the big mental shifts is that it's not, setting boundaries is not something that excludes. It is the parameters by which you will include that person in your life. One of the ways that we look at whether or not we're going to enforce a boundary is, I'm not excluding you. I'm making sure that I don't leave the real me behind. I'm not willing to admit you at the expense of me. I'm not willing to let myself go and I be left outside while you get to come in and enjoy and do whatever you want. No. I want to be here. And this is the space I get to be in. And if you want to be in this space with me, great. Right? And the people who value you, they're going to adjust. They're going to say, that makes sense. I understand that you're doing that for your peace, for your self-care, for your mental health. It's not a loss. It's not like, the people who care about you are not going to see this as, I'm losing out on something. I'm losing out on full, unthrottled access to you. They're going to say, oh, I see you're caring for yourself. Wow. Let me help you value you by honoring your boundaries. And one of the principles I say in the book, 7 Dirty Secrets of a Strong Black Woman, one of the things I say in the book is that we definitely teach people how to value us. If you are constantly going without, making yourself go without, allowing yourself to go without, allowing your boundaries to constantly be violated, if you're constantly beating yourself up and talking down about yourself, you are literally modeling for everyone else how they will value you. If I'm kicking the can down the road, you're not going to pick the can up and go, oh man, this can has got to be worth 15 grand because I'm kicking the can down the road. So if I want you to know that this is valuable, I'm going to pick the can up and say, hey, this must be I can't believe someone left this on the ground. This is invaluable. Then the person watching me goes, oh, it's definitely valuable, right? So the value that I show myself is what I model for other people. That's the value that they get to see. They're not going to value me at a level that I won't demonstrate for myself. So when I say this is a boundary, or when I tell myself this is a boundary, I'm not going to do this again. When I let that boundary be violated and I don't check it, I tell that person I don't value me. And they go, okay, well, that was just something you said, and I'm going to continue to violate that boundary. And then what happens to us? We get angry and resentful because they keep crossing our boundaries. When the truth of the matter is, sometimes it's not just that they're boundary crossers. Sometimes we have not demonstrated how serious we are about the enforcement of our boundaries. Truth be told, right? Your boundaries have to be hard and fast. They've got to be a wall that says this is as far as you can go. These are the limits. These are the parameters. These are, like I said earlier, the rules of engagement. And I love you and I want to hang out with you, but I can't hang out with the toxic stuff that you do that hurts me. Right? And so why do we end up in these situations where we are boundaryless? Why did I end up there? I told you a lot of times it's this avoiding the what if, avoiding the confrontation. But it's also avoiding this sense of guilt that I might be doing something that would hurt them or that they might not like, right? And sometimes it's even from guilt that they actually place on us. I can't believe you make me, I can't believe, yeah, the guilt that they actually place on us. But other times it's just this sense of guilt that comes to us that we have been conditioned to feel because in the past when we enforced boundaries, we were made to feel guilty. But when we are stepping into this new version of ourselves, the one that is not people-pleasing, the one that is not self-sacrificing, the one that is embracing self-care and self-love and boundaries and wholeness and embracing their power and their voice, we have to remember that even though the enforcement of those boundaries initially is painful, it's all a part of the process. You cannot become adept at enforcing your boundaries until you start enforcing those boundaries and understanding how the enforcement of boundaries makes you feel, right? And recognizing that and then speaking back to it and like, I don't have to feel guilty. I'm not doing anything harmful to anybody else. And the people who care about me and who want me to be mentally and emotionally healthy and physically healthy are going to respect the fact that I have set boundaries. And if my boundary is, I don't want to talk on the phone after 9 p.m. because I'm spending time with family or because I'm resting, and you call me every day at 9:15 p.m., well, don't be angry when I don't answer that phone call. When I talk to you the next day and you go, but I called you at 9:15. Yeah, but I told you I'm not answering calls after 9 o'clock because I'm spending time with my family. because I'm I'm resting. I'm decompressing from the day, right? That's not telling them anything negative. I want to talk to you, but I'm going to talk to you tomorrow. I'm going to talk to you tomorrow. I am not going to allow my boundaries to be fluid. I'm going to be really clear. And after a while, they will know. Don't call her after 9 o'clock. She's not answering the phone. So when we look at whether or not this is a healthy boundary, if this is a reasonable boundary, I look at who gets hurt by enforcement of the boundary, who gets hurt by lack of enforcement of the boundary, right? If I get hurt or if someone else gets hurt, physically hurt, emotionally hurt, am I causing someone actual damage by telling them what I'm no longer going to do? Right? The toxic behavior that I'm no longer going to allow, that's not an unhealthy boundary. If I'm saying I'm protecting me, I'm protecting my heart, I still want to allow you in, but only under these terms. Right? Sometimes that pain for them is, I can't come in here and act a monkey. I can't come into her life and run roughshod over her anymore. And I don't like that. That pain of change for them is very unpleasant in many cases. And for some of us, the people pleaser in us, we want to go and soothe that by saying, okay, all right. No. You got to sit in that. You've got to be okay with being uncomfortable, because that discomfort is not going to last forever, because eventually they are going to adjust and they're going to see that this is the parameters of play. These are the rules of engagement, or they're like, I can't deal and I choose not to deal with you. Your choice, right? That is your choice. Just because my boundary is inconvenient for you doesn't mean that my boundary isn't valid or that it is unhealthy for me. That's not what it means at all. You just don't like the boundary. You'll get over that. Right? You'll get over that. So one of the things that we have to remember is that loving in general requires structure. Loving in general requires action. It requires you to do something. And we're really, really good at loving other people, at exerting that action outward. Many of us, those of you for whom this podcast truly resonates, probably aren't so good at creating that same sort of structure and action when it comes to how I want to be loved. Because someone somewhere along the way said to us, how dare you? Who do you think you are? Right? We were made to feel like when I say I love myself this much, we were told that's arrogance. That's conceit. Right? That's boasting. That's not being humble. That's not demure. Right? But if I'm going to love myself, there has to be structure. Remember this thing. In the Bible, Jesus says you have to love your neighbor as yourself. And most of the time we think, oh, that just means I need to love my neighbor. We don't realize that the B part of that sentence is really the A. It's really the love yourself first. Because the extent to which you love yourself is the extent to which you can love everybody else. Right? You can always tell the people who don't love themselves because they don't love anybody else. Or the people who don't have a good relationship with themselves. They have a toxic way of handling themselves. They have a toxic way of handling everybody else. The people who truly love themselves, you see it in the way that they treat others. You see it in the genuine, true love with which they handle everybody else. So when you put yourself last, when you're available 24/7, when you allow people to come into your life and just wreak havoc, that is not love. That is not self-love. That might be obligation. That might be tolerance. That may be a lot of things, but it is not love. It's emotional labor. It is work. It is doing something that I have to do. It is not something that brings me joy, brings me fulfillment, makes me feel closer to you, makes me feel bonded to you, makes me feel like I'm honoring us, the relationship between the two of us. It is emotional labor disguised as connection. It is doing what you're obligated to do, what you feel you have to do to make someone else happy so that you can keep the peace. But meanwhile, you're not happy, right? If I'm doing something to make you happy and it makes me happy too, great. If I'm doing something to make you happy and it makes me feel like trash inside, that's not so good, right? And that's why we have to have these boundaries. When we're in the right relationships, we don't feel bad for protecting our peace. People who truly care about us want to see us in a peaceful state. They don't want to see us stressed out. They don't want to see us at our wits' end. They don't want to keep us in constant conflict. They don't want us in fight or flight mode all the time. They want our peace. They should want that for us if they really love us, right? And they should be encouraging us to pursue that for ourselves with them. They should be saying to you, is that okay? You know, I want to know how to interact with you. I want to know how to treat you. They don't make you feel bad for protecting your peace. If someone gets angry with you for creating boundaries, it's because they were benefiting from you having none. They were using you, friend. They were using you. They were getting all they could get. And the moment you were like, let me turn this little spigot right on off. Oh, well, where's the flow? Where's what I'm entitled to? How dare you? Those people are the people who have been using you. The people that get angry with those boundaries when you set those boundaries. They're not loving you. They're using you. And so when you enforce those boundaries, you are reminding yourself that I don't want to be a toxic giver. I don't want to give room to people who are only going to take, because truth be told, toxic giving and toxic taking are things. Just like you can, he's a taker, she's a taker. Yeah, but you might be a toxic giver, and that's why you attract toxic takers. Hello, somebody. And if you are, it's because you have not created that boundary. And when somebody bumped up against that boundary, you stood your ground. And you said, listen, I want to get down with you. I love you. But only under these circumstances. It is conditional love. It's conditional love. And the condition is, you love me like I love me. God is the only one that has unconditional love. Truth be told, and they'll say parents love unconditionally too, but not always. There are conditions. There should be conditions to people having access to your heart. Everybody should not get that. Boundaries are those conditions. Okay, you can say amen to that. So your boundaries don't just protect you. That's the takeaway from this. Your boundaries, yes, they're self-love. Yes, they protect you. But most of all, they protect your relationships. They protect the things that are important to you, the connections to the people who are important to you. They signal how much I love me. They signal how much I value me. It's selfishness in the best way, because it's selfishness that ultimately allows you to give more, to give better, to give in a healthy way, and not to always be giving out of I have to, or they're going to be angry. I have to, or they're going to make me feel guilty. I have to, or everything's going to fall apart. I'm going and I'm giving. I am tired. I am worn. I am weary and exhausted, but I'm going to show up anyway and I'm going to give. That is a lack of boundaries. We're not doing that anymore. We're deciding that we're going to be very intentional about how we show up and who we allow into our lives and how we allow them to treat us. By demonstrating, by providing a demonstration through the way that we treat ourselves. That's the goal here. That's what a boundary is. It is a demonstration to everybody else how much I love and value myself. And so that way you get to know how to love and value me too. And I can do the same for you. I mean, this is a selfish thing, but I certainly want to know your boundaries because I want to respect your boundaries. If we're in this relationship together, this is not let me take from you and then you take back from me. No. This is how can we open the doors to give to one another in relationship in a healthy way? How can I make sure that the flow from me to you is healthy and the flow from you to me is healthy? That's in my mind, the overarching principle of boundaries. Now, when you're in real life, when you're dealing with toxic people, it's not all that kumbaya and beautiful. Sometimes it is difficult. It's painful. So what can we do about that? The first thing is you need to decide what your boundaries are. What is a boundary for you? What is a hard no for you? And then how will you communicate that when you set the boundary? And how will you communicate that when someone comes up against the boundary, when somebody encounters the boundary? What will you say? What will you do? Right? So I gave you that example and someone saying, hey, I'm implementing a new boundary. In 2025, I'm not staying on the phone all night long. 9 o'clock, I'm off the phone because I want to have some wind down time and I want to be in bed and sleeping by 10 o'clock. So I'm not answering the phone after 9. And you have someone who says, well, I don't get off work till 9:30, so I'm going to call you on the ride home. You just accept my call. Now we've got a decision to make. How do we enforce that boundary? A, do we enforce it? B, how? A, yes, enforce the boundary. B, how? You're going to have to call me on your lunch break. If you get off at 9:30, call me on your lunch break. Because if you call me at 9:30, I'm going to be in D&D mode. And I'll talk to you in the morning. I'll call you when I get up. Right? So it's knowing how, it's already knowing in your mind how you're going to enforce that boundary. And if it takes practice, it takes practice. But at the end of the day and at the end of the road, you said what you said. And you have to stick by what you said. Otherwise, people will never believe when you say, this is a boundary. This is something I'm no longer going to do. They'll just be like, yeah, maybe for today. Maybe for today. Yeah, she'll fold. I'll just keep at it. She'll fold. And like they say, I can show you better than I can tell you. This is a boundary. And I'm just not going to engage. I'm not going to argue with you. When you raise your voice, I'm going to excuse myself. I'm not going to argue. And so when we get in this when we get into this situation where now your voices are raised, hey, listen, I mentioned I'm not going to argue. We're not going to yell back and forth. So now we have a choice. We can maintain low tones and continue, or we can depart and pick this back up at another time, right? There are all kinds of ways that you can demonstrate to people what boundaries look like. Then when you get into pro mode, and we'll talk about this in another episode, you can just be like, no, and walk off and be like, absolutely not. That is a boundary. No is such a powerful boundary setting word. And when you get to the point where you can wield it as a complete sentence, you are in like master mode. And we'll get there together on Unperturbed, the podcast. Listen, I am so thrilled that you tuned into this podcast. I can't wait for you to join me for the next one. Listen, don't forget to like and subscribe and share this podcast with other people, sister friends who would benefit from listening to this podcast. And don't forget to join my community, The Haven. Listen, we loving on each other in The Haven. Go to enterthehaven.net. You'll see some information flash on the screen as we depart. But again, I thank you so much for joining me, and I will see you next time. Bye. Hey, thanks for joining me for another powerful conversation. If that hit home for you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you never miss what's coming next. And definitely share this with a sister friend so she can get in on this too. Now look, don't just stop here. Let's continue the conversation inside The Haven, my private Facebook community where we get even deeper and do the real work of shedding the strong Black woman mindset. This is a safe space I've curated just for us. Head on over to enterthehaven.net to join us today. Now, before you go, drop a comment and let me know what resonated with you the most, and I'll catch you in the next one. Until then, take care of you first. See you soon.